Hello and welcome to On Leading with Greatness. I'm Jim Salvucci. This week's installment, Justice Isn't Equal, It's Better. The Leader's Missing Mandate. We become just by doing just acts. Aristotle. There is no leadership without justice. I see justice as a matter of applied fairness, the equitable distribution of rights and limitations, goods and debts across all society. In a just world, all are truly the same in their treatment, allowing for individual needs and circumstances. No one has an advantage given them that is denied others. This is where we can see the distinction between equality and equity. The Declaration of Independence famously states that all men are created equal, a bold notion that Thomas Jefferson adapted from John Locke's Second Treatise of Government. Of course, being created equal, that is, starting out with the sameness and achieving fairness, diverge wildly. That's where equity comes in, and justice. Before the law, we are supposed to all be equal, meaning we are treated equally from the outset. How the law shakes out after that is a matter of some controversy. But as Anatole France wryly observes, the law, in its majestic equality, forbids the rich and poor alike to sleep under bridges, to beg in the streets, and to steal bread. Equality under the law is not necessarily equal in its practical application. Should the mugging victim lying unconscious on the sidewalk get arrested for vagrancy? Justice under the law and equality under the law, while similarly defined, differ in scope. Justice is more attuned to matters of equity. While leaders honor equality, they practice justice habitually, not perfectly, but consistently. If the foundation of leadership is character, as I've long maintained, and part of one's character is one's values, then justice becomes a key value to the leader. Leadership is justice in practice. The leader, to be effective, must apply equity wherever possible. You typically can't treat one team member with kindness and greet another with flagrant arbitrariness. You can't give Susie the day off when she asked, but deny Harry the same. That's equality. But if you give Susie the day off because her kid is sick while Harry merely wants to spend yet another beautiful day playing golf, the response would be to accommodate Susie and rebuff Harry. Some people distort the notion of equality into a matter of precedent, that once an institution has done something for someone, it must be willing to do so again every time. This idea of precedent appeals to us because it seems clear, clean, and superficially fair. When I was a university administrator, I sometimes had to consider waiving requirements for students due to exigent circumstances. Let's say a student couldn't take an exam because of a documented hospitalization. The student might then ask me for permission to take the exam at a later date. Before making such calls, I would sometimes consult relevant faculty and staff members for advice. With alarming frequency, there'd be at least one person who would say we shouldn't make an exception for a student, even when they had a legitimate hardship, because doing so would set a precedent. Their argument was that we'd have to then offer any students who made a similar request the same privilege. Absurd. I encountered this objection so often that I had a stock reply. If another student, under the same exact circumstances, made the same exact request, I would grant it for the same exact reason I did the first time, because it's the right thing to do. If the circumstances differed, though, that might warrant a different decision. Precedent played no role in my deliberations. That's how justice works. It's the movement from equality through equity toward true fairness. Therefore, justice hinges on fairness, not equality. By the way, in case you think me a pushover, let me disabuse you. I used to joke that the most perilous time to be a grandparent was around midterms and finals. It seemed a mass die-off of grandmas and grandpas took place every semester just in time to schedule their funerals during exams. I showed little patience for such BS requests. Putting justice to work. So, what does justice look like in the workplace? How can a leader practice justice consistently? Being a human endeavor, there's a degree of subjectivity and error to applying justice as a leader. So, be prepared to give yourself some room. At the same time, be prepared to make tough decisions, primarily on the basis of equity and fairness, and less on equality and precedent. People who fall back on raw equality and precedent to make decisions, or more precisely, to avoid making decisions, can't be leaders because they have no sense of justice. They're the same as people who compulsively follow rules without thought to consequences. Justice makes things as equitable as possible, yes, but often through unequal means. Making that call is the role of the leader. Many people balk at the notion of pursuing equity in the name of justice. They, sometimes wittingly, misapprehend the relationship between justice and equality. Remember that equality is only the starting place of justice. Fairness is the goal. The means to achieve fairness is equity. If you stop at equality, you are not just, and are doubly unjust if you do so while ignoring your own privileges and conveniences. Let's face it, we apply equitable principles to render things fair all the time without blinking. For instance, many workplaces have onboarding programs for new employees. Now, imagine a workplace that operates from a principle of strict equality as an end in itself. In that workplace, new employees would not be shown where the bathrooms are or have a get-to-know-you lunch with the CEO because some veteran employees were on their own when they start back in the day. Equity is not about imposing limitations. It's about eliminating. While we're on it, think about how the equity impulse of onboarding programs actually helps the entire organization by accelerating new employees' integration. Equity is a net benefit, as is justice. The Greek historian Thucydides articulated an Athenian principle of power that many people still agree with. The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. This notion expresses the very reverse of justice. To be just is to seek ultimate fairness, not conquest. The just leader, a redundancy, strives for collaboration, not competition, let alone annihilation. We can see the Athenian power doctrine at play on the national and international stages, but you probably witnessed it in the workplace too. True leaders insist on the very opposite by pursuing justice in large and small ways. Sometimes it can take the form of giving people that little extra push, or maybe more. In my academic career, I worked for some really lousy university presidents, and one superb one. The lousy presidents tended to substitute equal opportunity for fairness by, say, opening the floor for discussion to solicit ideas. The result? Advice primarily emanated from the loudest and most empowered, not necessarily the best or most honest. Empty-headed and self-interested blowhards ruled the day. This is the equivalent of the Athenian might makes right philosophy that Thucydides describes. Only those who already have a voice or power deserve a voice or power. That's a fine notion if you're bent on world conquest, I guess, but a little dodgy when it comes to most workplaces. The true leader's goal is to empower all to move toward success. In contrast, when the superb president opened the floor, he knew to encourage those who were reluctant or even afraid to speak out. The subsequent advice he received was diverse and rich. The decisions he made, therefore, were more sound and truly collaborative. That's what leaders do. Notice that the other presidents, by merely opening the floor, ignored the advantages that certain individuals had. If they had approached discussions in a more equitable spirit, they would have avoided much suffering down the road. Instead, they regularly subjected themselves to bad and even manipulative advice that led to unfortunate outcomes. The superb president, as a true leader, practiced justice as almost an impulse. He was not perfect, not at all, but he strove for consistency. The results he achieved, his decades of success, spoke for themselves. The bond between leadership and justice remains immutable. It's a mandate. Great leaders seek to be just in all things, as Aristotle says, by doing just acts. Great leaders consciously apply principles of equity to bring about justice and fairness. Only then can they create cultures of mutual trust and collaboration. If you're a leader, the means to your goal is simple. Just act justly to achieve justice. I help leaders who mistrust conventional business wisdom get clear on what great leadership actually requires without mystical formulas, listicle strategies, or guru BS. If you're looking for this sort of leadership help, or maybe just like my writing, send me an email, jim@jimsalvucci.com. For weekly updates, become a free or paid subscriber. Thanks to my subscribers, especially those of you who have opted to pay. Your support keeps me writing and, I hope, keeps you reading, sharing, and all that fun stuff. You can find my book, Greater Than Great, on Amazon. Also, check out my talk for TEDx Clarkstown.